Good evening, and welcome to Soluble, America's Political Central. Today is March the 15th in the year of our Lord, 2023. Now, first and foremost, we want to start out on today's broadcast by, offering an apology to the viewers that we have, the few and far between viewers that we have accumulated thus far, who comes on from time to time, to click on Soluble Podcast to see what's going on and what we're talking about. In starting this out and launching this podcast on last year, our intention was to give, 3 broadcasts per week, 2 being political and 1 being an issue day, centered around Friday at the end of the week. Because of our daytime operations and the business that we're doing in the daytime, which really, pays the rent, which really pays all the bills, we become somewhat overwhelmed with the volume of work that we have, the volume of services that we have to perform during our daytime operations. So it's somewhat thrown us off from our goal of 3 broadcasts a week. We appreciate you bearing with us. Our intention is to, at the end of the day, get it right. We're heading into a presidential election cycle going into next year. And, before you know it, that time will be upon us. And so, the title of this broadcast is going to be The Grind, which is what we feel like here at Soluble we're in right now, the daily grind of politics. There's not really a whole lot going on. There's nothing really to do but govern right now. I mean, because we're in between election cycles. So back to what I was previously saying, and to close my point, we apologize for not being able to keep up with our desired outlook of 3 broadcasts per week. Again, we apologize, but when we do come on, and until we get this right, well, we can come back up to the speed that we so desired, which is 3 broadcasts a week. We will be bringing you soluble facts. We will be bringing you facts to try to help you, solve any political controversy that you may be in or going through in your own mind. I mean, we're staunchly Democrat here, and what our desire is to be a political middle ground, if you will, a political insight, if you will, to a day and time where politicians worked across the aisle. We weren't so extreme. Now, we know that, Republicans, they're going to push the extreme no matter what, because, that's in their playbook. They're great at fear mongering. That's in the Republican playbook. And, it's a great tactic to use when you're trying to get up votes, is to scare the American people. But, politics have gone so extreme. Now, some on the right will say it's extreme left and it's extreme right with no middle ground. It's soluble. We beg to differ. We haven't seen, over the last 8 years, Democratic politicians who are so extreme that they have no desire to work with Republicans. Now, with the previous president, with the previous Republican president, that was extreme right. That was as far right as the party had ever been. This was more far right than Ronald Reagan. This was more far right than Barry Goldwater. Once he flipped. So the former president came out with an extreme far right agenda. And, it would be easy to say that, well, the left is doing it also, but show us the proof. That's what we want to see here at Soluble. Where do we have a Democratic politician that's so far left, so far rogue left? Now, what's been created, what's been invented, if you will, what's been conjured up is wokeness in the Democratic Party. Now, as I've said on previous broadcasts, woke politics in America, or woke ideology, if it is there in the American people, we would just like to term it as, Americans standing up to save the republic. But If Republican politicians want to label it as a woke America, then so be it. Now, as we've said on previous podcasts, woke was created by the former president. Now, there's two things that the former president created, and he brought about in America and brought to the forefront as we'd never seen before. And those two things was domestic terrorism and, from the Republicans' point of view, woke. Now, both, as I said, was brought about, created, or brought to the forefront by the former president. One is bad, one is good. If you listen to Republican politicians, now they'll spin it and they'll spin it. And, when it comes to January 6th and acts of domestic terrorism, when you question them about that, then one of the first things that they want to bring up or say to counter that is, what about the riots of 2020 when they were anything but? And, it's beyond me. It's beyond, the people here at Soluble, because we're trying to solve. We're trying to solve it. Anything that's put forth out there, if it's bad policy from the left, we're trying to solve it. We're trying to encourage them to take it away. If they're bad politicians on the left, we're trying to solve it. We don't want them. The country doesn't need it. But when it comes to spin, which is definitely in the Republican playbook, what they'll say is that, you talk about January the 6th and domestic terrorism. What about the riots of the summer of 2020? As I said, they were anything but. The FBI put out their reports. The CIA come in with their assessments, their reports, and they come to the conclusion that these were in large and by far peaceful protests in the summer of 2020, with anarchists sprinkled throughout the crowd, trying to stir things up. This is the assessment of the professionals, of Central Intelligence, of the Federal Bureau. But yet the Republicans will ignore this. They will ignore it to create a talking point, to institute fear-mongering, and to have it spread amongst the electorate. You have domestic terrorists who invaded the Capitol on January the 6th to try and stop a peaceful transfer of power, which is what this country has known throughout its history. You've had pushback, you've had, conflicting points of view as to who the winner was, but never nothing to this level. And so it's dangerous for the Republicans to play with fire in this way, knowing that the CIA and the FBI reports have put out that these were by far and large peaceful protests. But that's where the Republicans are at. And it plays well into their role as fearmongers in order to institute fear, in order to gin up the vote. You have wokeness, according to the Republicans, and you have domestic terrorism, according to the federal government. Why can't the Republicans get on board with that? Why can't, and that's something that we have to ask ourselves as Democrats and Republicans. Why can't Republicans get on board with the facts? The facts stare them right in the face. The summer of 2020 was American citizens of all stripes standing up in defense of the Republic. And an American electorate who was fed up, who had had enough of MAGA and everything it stood for. This is what the protests of 2020 were all about. Equality, justice against police brutality. But yet, the Republicans won't say that for whatever reason. I guess, it serves their base. It serves their base well not to say that. But the truth of the matter is, both were created by the former president. What the Republicans are calling woke and domestic terrorism. One is bad, and one you can't get Republicans to speak out on. But they love the country. They don't want to see the country go in the wrong direction. They don't want, they think that when Democrats push back against the former president, that it's not good for the country. Why? Because Trump supporters will get upset about the truth, and then they don't want to cooperate and go along with everything that the Constitution stands for? What kind of ludicrousness is this? But that's what the Republicans want us as an American people. Don't push back on the former president too hard. When he's, a threat to the Constitution, he's a major threat to the Republic. The president has not shown even historically, a loyalty, a patriotism to America. He looks at America as, the great watering trough for him to grift off of. For him to collect money on the down low, on the sleazy, if you will. Cares nothing about the country. He had a chance to go to Vietnam. And there was a lot of conscientious objectors, if you will. There was a lot of young men at that time who objected to going to Vietnam. But when their name was called, they went off and served their country and stood up in the gap to defend democracy. The former president had a chance. Nothing. But all this from a man who loves his country. And so, this is what they're backing. This is what they're supporting. Both were created by the former president, wokeness and domestic terrorism. Both. So why do we have this party only talking about one side of this double-headed monster? Why? And that's not for us here at Soluble to come to a conclusion of agreement with the Republicans that wokeness is one side, one-sided of the head of a double-headed monster. That's not what we're agreeing with. We're just, as a figure of speech, putting it in the same category as to what Republicans believe is a threat to the country or the threats that's facing democracy today. This is something, wokeness is something that has been invented, created, and it's a very convenient talking point when you're trying to stoke fear, as the Republicans often do. Go to the playbook. But there's nothing to see here, ladies and gentlemen. There's nothing to see here. Now, while we're on the daily grind, we have, another somewhat failing or setback in the American democracy when it comes to the banking system. You have Silicon Valley Bank now, a failed bank. You have the heads of the bank, bank executives, selling off stocks, selling shares, selling shares in abundance behind the depositors' back, behind the everyday depositors of this bank's back. And so the bank failed. Now, once again, and there is so much more to the Republican platform and what they stand for, besides deregulation. But while we're on the subject of Silicon Valley Bank, we thoroughly laid it out to you with the rail disaster here a month or so ago. We laid it out thoroughly to you that this is what deregulation looks like. And when the wealthy fail us, when they're able to get a rollback, turn things back away from where they have to spend money on parts, or they have to follow certain regulations that's going to cost them money. When they fail us, then what? What do we have? And it's upon us again with Silicon Valley Bank. Dodd-Frank was rolled back under the former president. He came up with his own act. I don't have the name of it right here in front of me, but this was sometime in 2018 where the Dodd-Frank legislation was rolled back. And, that's what leading politicians are saying, but not just leading Democratic politicians. Financial experts are saying that, this calls for more regulation. Now, as I said, there's more to the Republican arsenal when it attacks the Democratic Party besides, regulation and them being a party for deregulation. But here we see it again. We've seen it in the rail industry where, there was a rollback. They didn't have to have certain braking systems once the former president took office. Now here we are again. Rollbacks. Rolling the Dodd-Frank legislation back. And so this is what we have. Now, the reason being is, as I've told you before on this broadcast, the Republicans are for the wealthy. They're for the wealthy, the top 1%. And we're not going to, demonize that. If that's, who the party stands for first and foremost, then that's who it stands for. But we all have to play by the rules. So now what? That Silicon Valley Bank has failed. Will the Republicans use the R word, regulation? Lo and behold. Now, we here at Soluble, we don't think that they will. Because why? They're paid not to use it. They're paid to think and come up with anything that could be causing this problem with Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank. These banks that are buying, bonds at low interest rates. And now the Feds are raising interest rates, and now they're in trouble. Now, as I said, the Republicans, you'll hear them say it's because of, banks trying to abide by DEI rules and such things as that. Because they're paid, trust me, they're paid not to use the word regulation. But what else does it call for here? Here you have bank executives selling off shares under the nose of their depositors, not telling them anything. Not telling them anything. And the Republicans sit by silently. They sit by silently. Now, thank God that common sense has prevailed with the current president that we have in office now. And this, this responsibility, this financial hit is going to be taken by the shareholders, as it should be. As it should be. I'm just a depositor here. And I'm trusting my bank and the executives that run said bank to play by the rules. See, to not play fast and loose because of rollbacks that may or may not have happened in the year 2018 under the former president. As a depositor, I'm expecting my bank to play by the rules, to follow the rules, not to play fast and loose with my hard-earned money. But here we go again, ladies and gentlemen. We're in the financial sector now. We're in the banking sector, where we could get a downgrade for Moody's. It could hurt the banking system in America, thereby hurting the dollar. And as I said, leading financial experts, never mind Democratic politicians like Bernie Sanders, who has called this socialism for the rich with the rollbacks of 2018. Never mind Senator Elizabeth Warren. Leading financial experts are saying that this is largely due to rollbacks in the banking industry. And what has happened with SVB, Signature Bank, and possibly others is a direct result of these rollbacks. And, it calls for more regulation. Because, what we have to understand as an American electorate, that this 1% of millionaires and billionaires, they have to have someone watching them. And that's where Big Brother comes in at, like it or not. Trust me, the Republican politicians are getting paid to keep the feds off of the backs of major corporations, to keep federal laws out of their pocketbooks. And all we're trying to get here is for the 1% to pay their fair share. But that's what Republican politicians are working hard for, to help them to cheat, to make it a way where they can find any loophole to fall through and not have to pay. So here we are. This is, once again, this is what deregulation looks like in the financial sector. And as I said, if the federal, this is proof, and this is evidence of what could happen if the federal government doesn't watch closely. By large part, the 1%, because they get greedy. This is greed. This all comes down to greed, corruption. How are you going to sell off shares, an abundant amount of shares, daily, and keep it from your depositors. Could this only happen on a Republican watch? Now, if the Democrats are doing it, if the Democrats we find somewhere, along the line where they played a pivotal role in causing this action, we need to let the chips fall where they may, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Americans. As I said, here you have 2 cases of deregulation backfiring, especially in the financial sector. We would hope that, the 1%, the millionaires and billionaires of this country would do the right thing. They would do the right thing. But these regulations are necessary. They're necessary. Because when they take shortcuts, it's not just the working class that suffers, but America itself suffers as a country. We've been threatened with a downgrade. We've possibly been hit with a downgrade in the banking sector because of this. And, where does the buck stop? At this point, no one knows. At this point, no one knows. But, to my fellow Americans, this is deregulation at its finest. And the Republicans don't have an answer for you. They won't have an answer. They will dodge. They will say that, it's anything but what it is. And, it shouldn't have to be that way. Excuse me. It shouldn't have to be that way. But this is proof as to why Big Brother has to constantly be watching and on the lookout. And, we're not trying to politicize this here. Once again, the solution. What's the simple? The question begs the answer. What is the simple solution to the banking industry, the banking sector, so that things like this won't happen again? It's simple. Do they need more rules or less rules? Because that's what regulation is all about. Rules that are put in place to protect the American economy in this particular situation, to protect the dollar, to protect America's credibility, to protect our credit rating. So, these rules are very necessary. But if you listen to Republican politicians, this is government overreach at its finest. And they've been able to well craft the message that has been delivered to them by lobbyists, who are put out there by the 1%. They've been able to well craft the message. Now, as I said, when it comes to the rail industry and regulatory rules, federal regulatory rules regarding the railing industry, when it comes to the banking industry, the banking system, and federal regulatory rules, who is on the right side of history here? It shouldn't take a hard case study. And as I said, if the Republican Party is wrong about deregulation, what else could they possibly be wrong about? What else could they possibly be wrong about? So, we don't want that extreme hardcore left. We should be a party that, negotiates from the middle, tries to deliver from the middle, tries to deliver from a position of compromise where, we know we can't get it all at one time, but we're in the grind right now as we speak. We're in the grind. And, that's what's going on in the daily grind. Weakness now, and we don't know where the buck is going to stop here. We don't know how far or how deep this is going to go with the failure of Silicon Valley Bank. But we know that, once again, this is deregulation at its finest. And, we have to thank our lucky stars that we have a common sense president in office now, a Democrat, who is all for regulation where it's called for. We don't want government overreach. That's not capitalism. We all know that, Democrats and Republicans. Too much government overreach is not capitalism. But when there's greed, when there's corruption, when there's possible insider trading, when there's this temptation to cheat, You have to tighten the rules. You have to tighten the regulatory rules. And this more falls on the Republican Party more than it does the Democrats, because this is the section of America that they represent first and foremost. The wealthy, the 1%, the corporate executives. This is who they speak for. This is who they govern for. You see the former president, when he first come into office, the first thing he does, which is the last thing that the 1% needs, is sign a tax break into law. The first thing that he does is the last thing that the wealthiest of Americans need. So, you know, it is what it is. And it's going to be up to us to continue to pay attention and be ready at each and every election cycle. Now, our position here at Soluble, our goal, our stated purpose is to try to win Democratic seats all across the board. Federal judges, senators, congressmen, local elections when it comes to mayors, state elections when it comes to governors. And let's see how great America can become under Democratic leadership. Now, would the solution be to jump ship if we were to put a rogue candidate in office, something equivalent to the former President Trump? No, it's to stand in the gap and continue to negotiate, to continue to legislate for change in American politics. It wouldn't be time to jump ship. We're staunchly, we're firmly rooted in the Democratic Party. And it's a party that is for all of America. It's a party that's for all of America. And so this is where we find ourselves at now, in the grind, before the election cycle. And as I said, things are ho-humming along good. Had it not been for the bad news in the banking sector with SVB, you know, there was good news otherwise. Jobs, you know, inflation is not doing what they thought it would do. The financial experts, the jobs report was great for the month of February. And then along comes this Silicon Valley Bank that is doing underhanded things to undermine, you know, the depositors and everyday working class American people, to start selling off instead of just, you know, being straightforward and letting, you know, those who are depositors, those who are doing business with the bank, you know, let them know what's going on, simply. And so, you know, you can't, once again, you can't trust it. Just like the rail industry. You know, they're telling us that the water is safe, but they're not drinking it. They're not taking a glass in their hand from any given tap in East Palestine, Ohio, and taking a drink. This will solve it. This will solve it. And this is what, you know, Soluble stands for. It's easy to solve. Now, when you listen to politicians, it could be on the right or the left. It makes it seem like, you know, it's difficult. There's a lot of red tape. But lo and behold, if we continue to rock the vote, you will be able to see how easy this is to solve. You will be able to see how easily it is to solve. And it's just that simple. As I said, like vultures hanging out on a branch, waiting for the smell of decomposition. This is the Republican Party now, hanging out, waiting. And, you know, we thank God for the president, keeping America on an even keel. Nothing is going on. There's nothing there. There's no there for the Republicans to pounce on. But they're waiting, lo and behold. They're waiting to create something or invent something. You know, when it comes to foreign policy, our soldiers are stressed. You know, our soldiers are post-traumatic in a lot of ways. You know, we had 9/11 and we sent our young men and women off to fight for democracy. Now we know from an American standpoint, an American viewpoint, whether you're Democrat or Republican, deep down, we had no business in Iraq. No business whatsoever. And so, as I said, you know, our soldiers now, you know, they're stressed. They're PTSD. And we have a president right now, a current president, who has America even keeled on foreign policy. To make Russia now rethink, to make Russia now realize that, a coalition of the willing goes a long ways in preventing bloodshed. And that's what, the brilliance of Joe Biden is on full display here when it comes to foreign policy. He's went around the world. He's went to Ukraine. He's went to Poland, and he's formed his coalition. He's jailed NATO together, and he's created an alliance there that the world respects, and frankly, the world needs right now. It's a deterrent. What's happening with Russia as it relates to Ukraine, it's a deterrent. If China thinks about invading Taiwan, if North Korea thinks about, invading South Korea, you have a strong president in office now who has our allies strongly formed in a bond. And it is great for world peace. It's great in preventing bloodshed. And you have, the Republicans on the other side saying that, Ukraine is not really important. So what are we supposed to do? Let Russia run roughshod? And as I've said before on previous broadcasts, we have things here in America that we have to deal with as well. And, that's going to be up to all Democrats to get involved, not just us here at Soluble. But back to my point, at a time where democracy is being challenged all over the world, now more than ever, by some of our strongest foreign adversaries, it's great to see a president in office who knows how to listen to his advisors, the Joint Chiefs, and fine-tune the machine to keep everything running along smoothly. Our adversaries, our foreign adversaries abroad, now they're thinking twice. They're rethinking. In some cases, they're not thinking about it because the president has so craftily, in all his wisdom, formed a bold alliance when it comes to NATO and when it comes to, countries who want to be NATO members. They're all on one accord that Ukraine is a free nation, a free state. And so, it's good for democracy here at home, and it's good for democracy abroad. And, we welcome the president's policies. We welcome the fact that he's a great listener, and then he knows how to take decisive action that is good for all America. Because the last thing we need right now is to throw our troops head first into a war where, we don't see what our purpose is, as we did in Iraq. It's great to have a current commander-in-chief who knows what he's doing when it comes to foreign policy. And it's keeping us safe. It's keeping the world safe. It's keeping the world safe because the president has formed a bond. He's formed an alliance. He's got a real coalition of the willing to stand up to Russia and any other would-be tyrannical state, any other autocratic nation who would try to invade a free country. And so we're grateful for it here at Soluble. Those are just, a few things that are going on in politics in this grind. Back to, I'm always referring to the 90-something percentile people of color who are voting in the Democratic Party. Now is the time to put forth your ideas, put forth, if you will, your demands, on what you're hoping for, on what you're wanting in these elected officials. We control 2/3 of government. So, now is not the time to be complacent because we still have a lot of work to do. And, if we continue to turn out every election cycle, after every election cycle, then we will eventually get these things that we need to get done. We will get them over the finish line. Laws protecting everyday Americans from police brutality. Prescription drug prices lowered. Everyone paying their fair share. Thinking about the future of the climate in this country. Thinking about climate change. we will get these issues done. A woman's right to choose. Now, this is a hot talking point right now. And common sense would tell us as a civilized country, that when it comes to a woman's right to choose, we must protect the woman. There must be something on the book to protect the woman from rape or incest. We must go after the rapists or those who would commit such a foul act upon a woman. And so, when it comes to a woman's right to choose, we do support that as Democrats. And so, let history record who will be on the right side of these issues. They're still facing us today. The Republican Party is not going anywhere. Their ideas are antiquated. Their ideas are far behind what a fast-moving, civilized world has decided the direction that it wants to take. This is a party that is looking backwards and not forward. This is a party thinking in reverse and not thinking forward. And so, we have to be ready. We have to be ready. We're in the grind. There's no there. And, woke FBI agents being exposed with political bias towards Republicans. Will Congressman Jim Jordan come out and say it? Will he come flat out and say it that there's no there? He's had the hearings. They still may be holding current hearings right now. But as of now, there's no there. So what? And the congressman has come out strongly advocating to the American people that there's corruption there. There's a bias there. There's wokeness in the FBI. This is what's going on in the daily grind. There's nothing there. And the country is moving along well. Inflation is down. Inflation is being battled. You have the feds adjusting the interest rate accordingly, trying to deal with inflation, trying to tame inflation. The jobs report looks great. So if it ain't broke, why try to fix it? We control 2/3 of government. The Republicans barely have a majority in the House, a small razor-thin majority. And so, between now and the next election cycle, it's time for us to take a long, hard look at what they're going to do with that power. We saw the first thing that they done. And as it speaks to them governing for the wealthy, we can't help but say it over and over again. Watch out for it. It's technology. Before the midterms, it's the border. It was the border. We have no border now. The border is erased. It was the border. But the first legislation that they comes up with after the midterms, and they have a majority in the House, is something going after the IRS. And the IRS is, doing its job, trying to find tax cheats, trying to make sure that everybody pays their fair share. And this is the first, legislation that's drafted out of the Republican Party. So how can anyone convince us here at Soluble that they're not for the wealthy first and foremost? Now, what they'll do is they'll play the race card. They'll play the race card better than, anyone you've ever seen. But it's not a racial issue. What it is it's a wedge issue that they use to get out their vote. I mean, as human beings in America and all over the world, every race has a right to exist on this planet. Every race that God has created under the sun has a right to exist. So, this is a wedge issue. And this is something that the Republicans use. I mean, they mean it. This is the party of Strom Thurmond and the Dixiecrats. This is, the spillover effect, the lingering effects. This is what they stand for. So they definitely believe it. But as Democrats, we have the upper hand now. Now, can we keep it? That's the question. We have the power. Can we harness it and use it to our advantage? And as I said, in controlling the narrative, what about a state like Mississippi. Once again, the poorest state in the union. And here you have a capital, Jackson, Mississippi. Every capital in the nation, every capital in the union is touted as grand, as the state putting all their efforts behind the capital city, because it's a reflection of the whole state. And here you have Jackson, Mississippi, struggling just to have clean drinking water. And, as far as the daily grind is concerned, this is something that, we can't afford to be distracted from. As Democrats, we have to ask ourselves why, in the richest nation on earth, or is a state in the union having these kind of struggles? And, we have to advocate and continue to advocate with persistence, with determination. Because if we let it go to the back burner, then that's where it's going to stay. So you have the power, and so now it's time to harness in this daily grind. In this daily grind. The country is moving right along, is perking right along. There's nothing to see in terms of corruption. The Silicon Valley bank failure, of course, the Republicans are going to spin it. First and foremost, as American citizens, you should know that this has to do with deregulation. First and foremost, could it have been members on a board? Could it have been DEI programs that were instituted into banking that caused this? Let's look into it. It could be, something that had a slight effect. But if there was any effect, it was just that slightly. This is first and foremost what deregulation looks like. And when it happens, the Republicans have no answer. The former president rolled it back, and here it is. It's Enron all over again. It's Bernie Madoff all over again. It's the collapse of Wall Street all over again. But we have a common sense president. We have a commander-in-chief who knows how to put the blame at the feet of the party where it should lie. And the president has said that the shareholders, rightfully so, will bear the cost of this. Could you imagine where we would be if Republicans were in charge now? To look at a situation like SVB and continue to try to spin it, try to lie, try to deceive the American people. Because right now, as of this moment, when it comes to the rail disaster and deregulation, when it comes to this banking catastrophe, this bank failure and deregulation, they haven't said what could be the root cause of the problem, first and foremost. Now, we can look at contributing factors and things that may have slightly contributed to it. But first and foremost, we should be looking at the major reason why. Why not? We should be looking at the major reason why. And so, as I said in conclusion, if Republicans are wrong about deregulation, what else could they be wrong about? What else could they be possibly wrong about? Now, only time will tell. But we should look at ourselves as Americans and reflect out upon the world a forward-thinking civilization, a civilization that's moving forward, trying to make the lives of people better and better and better, not hearkening back to a time where, there was brutality, there was injustice, there was inhumane treatment, a time where women had to suffer in silence from brutality in the home, biasness in the system. A forward-thinking civilization. That's what we believe that the Democratic Party brings to the table. That's what we will champion here at Soluble, and that's what we will continue to advocate for and on behalf of a forward-thinking civilization. How do we move forward from a horrendous, brutal, closed-minded, half-hearted approach that happened in the past. Bring all Americans forward, whether you're born in the country or whether you immigrated here and became a citizen. This is what America is all about. Woke ideology is a falsehood. It's a creation. It's a figment. The Great Replacement theory, it's a falsehood. It's a figment. And these are just things that are constantly ginned up by the Republican Party. And they look kind of foolish, to be honest with you, because no one can really show us and define to us exactly what woke is and how it's a bad thing for American citizens to become aware that the Republic, which is the United States of America, is being seriously threatened under a tyrannical president whose whole administration is actors. And in some parts of the administration, there's an open vacancy there. And the American people stood up out of frustration, out of being fed up with the fact that they were starting to see in America that they didn't recognize, or that they recognized from centuries ago and that they didn't want to go back to. And so they rose up. But in the Republicans' mind, and from the Republicans' point of view, they are woke. And that's a bad thing. They should go back to sleep and, let Republican politicians continue to tell them that it's raining outside as they piss on their heads. That's what they would want us to do. And it would be foolish of us to do so. Now, you have one of the front runners here, in the Republican Party, one of the darlings of the Republican Party, the governor of Florida, Governor DeSantis. Now, he's championing, families, to let him tell it. He's anti-woke on everything. He's anti-woke on everything. Football games happen right here in the great city of Jacksonville. You have banners being flown over the stadium to, keep the Confederate flag up. You have hateful messages, hateful rhetoric being projected off of downtown buildings, downtown high rises, hateful messages being projected off during college bowl games when the world is watching, and the governor has nothing to say about it. Nothing to say about it. These hateful messages and this hateful rhetoric that's being spread, that's being, projected onto major city buildings. Nothing to say. So, that's where we have to push back as woke. And, from a Democratic point of view, to stand up and defend the Republic and push back against hate, bigotry, misogyny, corruption, women's rights. Woke is a great thing. And, as Democrats, we shouldn't let, another party define it as anything but something that's good. So, here we are in the daily grind. And this is the message going into the next election cycle for the 2024 presidential election. Woke ideology, and that's where they're at. That's where they're stuck at, on woke ideology, and they make it up as they go. So, as Democrats, we're going to have to be bold enough to stand up to this false narrative and show that, not only is woke when it comes to waking up to defend the Republic good, but it's very necessary for democracies all around the world to thrive, especially in Ukraine. So, let's in this daily grind, let's continue to stay aware. We are going to bring you all the relevant issues, all the relevant facts. We're ready to point out any discrepancy, and not from a biased Democratic point of view. Let's tell it like it is. As I said, with Silicon Valley Bank, if first and foremost the problem is regulation or deregulation, let's deal with that first and foremost. And then if there are other contributing factors, like people who may sit on these DEI boards, if this is a small contributing factor, let's deal with it accordingly too. But first and foremost, let's deal with the major issue. So, we want to put that out there and see if, our fellow Republicans, excuse me, if our fellow Republicans are willing to go along with that, or if they're willing to reach across the aisle and admit that, we may need to look at regulatory laws when it comes to banking, when it comes to things like the rail industry. Let's see. Right now, it remains to be seen. So, to my fellow Americans, you can trust and believe that they're not going to utter the R word, which is regulation. They're not hardly going to utter that word because they're paid not to. And so, we have to understand where we are here. Are we going to be a party that puts America first and what's good for all Americans? Or, what's good for a wealthy few in America who Republican politicians feel as if, America would be nothing without them, without the rich CEOs and the magnates and the tycoons. The Republican Party feels as if America will fail without them. But we beg to differ because we know that it's the working class that carries America. That carries America. That keeps the economy humming. That keeps the dollar strong. And so, this is the position. And it's time for positioning. The Republicans at this point in time, they have no answers. They have no answers for the banking disaster that has happened. And if they did, they would bring them forth in terms of talking about regulations, where we need to check down and where we, need to back off and let it be. Because, as I said, capitalism is not overreach into the financial sector to not give it a chance to correct itself. But when you have greedy executives at the top, then you definitely need regulation and you need Big Brother watching. Now, in closing, as I said at the beginning of this broadcast, our goal is to get back on track, bringing 3 broadcasts per week, 2 on politics, 1 on any given issue that we feel like is an important talking point for that week. And we've strayed. We failed to do so here coming into the new year because our daily operations are so heavy, because our orders are so great, because the demand is high for our daily operations and what we do. But nevertheless, we're going to be here. We're going to be here because at the end of the day, if there is anything going on in politics that seems to be controversial, that, there seems to be a breaking point where we can't reach compromise, the Solubles here. Solubles here to point the way. If we can get the Republicans to come just a little bit of the way, for example, in a solution to the banking crisis that SVB is dealing with, if we can get them just to come just a little bit of the way when it comes to regulation, this very well may be solved. This very well may be solved. So the question remains, will they? Can they? We know what they should do. But will they? Will they? Or will they, sit on their hands on the sidelines and try to find a way to twist this, to keep the wealthy winning and, the everyday American workers fighting to get ahead? This is going to conclude this broadcast tonight, dealing with the grind of politics. We're going to be here. We're going into another presidential election cycle, which 2024 is right around the corner. Here we are 3 months into 2023. So it's right here upon us. And now is not the time to get complacent. Now is the time to push while we have the power, while we still have the power. And we believe that we will continue to have it after the next election comes around. Because the intelligence of the average American citizen will prevail. So we believe we will still have the power even after the next presidential election. But we're going to advocate, and we're going to advocate on behalf of what's best for America. Because at the end of the day, if there's any turmoil, political, civil, this Soluble is here, and we're offering our goal Our attempt is to offer the best possible solution at the negotiating table so that civility prevails at the end of the day, and a civilized nation continue to be the shining example for the rest of the world. This concludes our broadcast tonight here at Soluble. We thank you for joining us. While we may have seemed, well, it may seem that if we have fell off, if we've fallen off pace, we're not going to make no excuses because we haven't reached our goal of 3 per week. But we will be here. We will constantly keep you informed because at the end of the day, as we said, if we're stuck in negotiation and stuck at a crossroads and we're looking for a solution, then Soluble is the broadcast to tune into. Thank you for joining us tonight. We pray that, all is well with you as you listen to this broadcast tonight. Stay safe. We know that there's, major storms going on up north. We know that there's major, foul weather going on out on the West Coast in California. So, stay safe, stay vigilant. And at the end of the day, stay tuned in to Soluble, because if there's any broadcast that's trying to solve the quagmires and the snares and the gripings and the infightings that we're constantly finding ourselves in, then Soluble, it's our goal here to be a solution to all. Thank you for joining us. This is Soluble signing off. Good night. Thank you.